Hi everyone, in this video we'll cover the final topic of key area 2 hormonal control of reproduction. We're going through the details of the menstrual cycle. So what we'll explore are the four main hormones, FSH, LH, estrogen and progesterone. We'll look at how their concentrations vary, which events of the menstrual cycle this controls. So as we talk through as well, remember we will be basing it on a 28-day cycle, and day one is considered the first day of menstruation. So I know we've got quite a bit of detail to go through, so please do make use of the diagram and the graph here to help make sense for all as we talk it through together. So what we've got here are the four hormones, the estrogen in pink, LH in purple, FSH in blue, and progesterone in green. So we've got the two distinct phases of the menstrual cycle, the follicular phase covering roughly the first 14 days, where it's about preparing the follicle for release, and the luteal phase, the final 14 days, where we're maintaining the endometrium and preventing the onset of the next cycle by that time for fertilisation. So, as previously discussed, reproduction actually begins in the brain. So, the first hormone that's released is one of those pituitary hormones from the pituitary gland, the follicle stimulating hormone FSH. So, the follicle it stimulates this within the ovary. It contains that maturing ovocell and will also release estrogen. So FSH increases, followed shortly by an increase in estrogen levels. So FSH stimulates the follicle to release estrogen. Estrogen has a couple of important roles in the menstrual cycle. One is in the proliferation or the growth of the endometrium, starts to repair from the breakdown of that tissue during menstruation to prepare it for a potential implantation later. Estrogen also will affect the cervical mucus, making it more thin and easy for the sperm to pass through. So during the first half of the menstrual cycle, during this follicular phase, estrogen levels will rise and eventually peak. And it's this peak or this maximum level of estrogen which triggers the pituitary gland to release its second hormone, the luteinizing hormone LH. So you should be able to see the LH levels surging or peaking here. So it's this surge of LH which triggers ovulation, i.e., the release of a mature ovum cell into the oviduct. So this will occur around the midpoint of the menstrual cycle, but ovulation always occurs when LH is at its highest level. Ovulation also marks the halfway point in the end of the follicular phase and the beginning of our luteal phase. So the follicle ruptured, ovum is now travelling down the oviduct, so that empty follicle will now be referred to as the corpus luteum, and it's this corpus luteum which secretes the final hormone, the progesterone. So progesterone, again, multiple roles that it plays within the menstrual cycle. One, it continues the development of the endometrium, particularly allowing for vascularization, i.e., the formation of new blood vessels. Again, preparing or making sure the endometrium is ready should implantation take place. The other role, progesterone, is in the negative feedback of the pituitary gland. So it's like hitting the pause button. We're trying to buy a little bit of time for the current released ovum cell to become fertilised. So while that's happening, we don't want a new ovum maturing, we don't want the release of another egg. Thus, progesterone suppresses the release of FSH and LH from the pituitary gland. No FSH, no LH, no new ovum cell. but also over time, the lack of LH in particular will lead to the degeneration or the breakdown of the corpus luteum. And without the corpus luteum, progesterone levels themselves will begin to drop, leads to the end of the menstrual cycle and the start of menstruation once again. The only way this would differ would be if fertilisation were to take place, in which case the corpus luteum would not degenerate, the progesterone levels would remain high, thus the endometrium is maintained for the duration of a pregnancy so that implantation can take place. So I know that was a lot of information, so if you do have any questions or anything that needs clarified, please just let me know. But let's try then a past paper question. So here you have a graph which shows the plasma concentration or blood concentration of estrogen, as well as the thickness of the endometrium and how it varies during one menstrual cycle. So pause the video and see if you can answer these questions. So part A tells us ovulation occurs on day 15 of the cycle. That must be when LH spikes. But you're asked to describe the role of estrogen in triggering this event. So this is going to be about linking these two hormones. As I said, we know ovulation is caused by LH, but we don't get that surge or spike of LH without the estrogen. So your answer will be estrogen stimulates or causes production or triggers the release of the LH. Part C, you were asked to suggest one way in which the graph for the next menstrual cycle would differ from this one if the woman became pregnant during that cycle. So our graph shows us estrogen concentration and the thickness of endometrium, which are the points that we need to consider. So what would be different about estrogen levels, or what would be different about the thickness of the endometrium if there is a pregnancy? So the endometrium, well, as long as you get to the idea that either it doesn't decrease or it's maintained. So normally at the end of a menstrual cycle, without the hormones, the endometrium would be broken down. But if pregnancy does take place, the progesterone levels remain high, the estrogen levels remain constant, and the endometrium is maintained. So either focus on the endometrium itself or on the estrogen concentration levels, which are going to remain constant, stay the same, stay around 30 units if you're taking the data from the graph, or would not decrease or would remain high. So hopefully that's helped the menstrual cycle make a little bit more sense. As I said, you can always leave your questions if you have any.